Hello, everyone. You are listening or watching Chatting with Candice. I'm your host, Candice Horbacz. Before we get into this week's episode, if you could take 1 second and hit that little subscribe button, it helps us out a lot with growth algorithm and then also notifies you anytime we have an update. We are going to get back to 2 episodes a week. I pinky promise. We are working on it, but I don't want you to miss an episode while we are navigating our uploading schedule. This week is a very highly anticipated guest. I have been mentioning his work ad nauseum since I've read it. Ian Kerner is a practicing sex therapist, sexologist, clinical practitioner, author of many, many books, but my personal favorite is She Comes First. We are going to be heavily focused on that during this conversation. If you want to improve your sex life, and I don't know anyone that doesn't, and want to improve your intimacy, your technique, learn a little bit more about anatomy and the psychology behind arousal, this is the episode for you. We will be having Ian on for a part 2 because there's just way too much to get into in one single episode. I hope you enjoy this episode. I had a wonderful time. Please help me welcome Ian Kerner. Ian, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been quite the feat to make this happen between like weather and travel and schedules. But I have been raving about your book since I've read it, and my audience has been waiting for this episode. I've been like, teasing them that I was going to be interviewing you, and they are all patiently or maybe impatiently waiting. So I'm very excited to put this out.
Yeah, I'm very happy we could finally make this happen.
Yes, me too. So this morning I was going through a bunch of your other podcasts and interviews, and one of the things that I thought was really funny was you were mentioning when you were on, I think, a presser for She Comes First, and you were going on Good Morning America, and they had an issue with the title of the book. They thought it was too provocative, and they had to had to actually cover it. And the title of the book, She Comes First, you're like, how is this provocative? This is necessary. This is information everyone needs, and it's not vulgar in any way. It was kind of, my interpretation was women's pleasure or like prioritizing it in any way, like that's the provocative issue.
I think so. I mean, this was, coming off the Sex and the City sort of time, and Viagra commercials were everywhere. Janet Jackson's nipple had just been bared, So, and here I am trying to do a book tour about a sex book, and everyone was sort of canceling based on FCC stuff. I was supposed to be on Howard Stern, and somehow the Today Show though is still interested in having me, so I was grateful for that. But then they said that the title is so provocative that they have to cover it up and not show it to the audience, and that's what they told everyone. And then, yeah, they revealed She Comes First, and everyone was like, that's the title. That's a cool title. It's not provocative. But I think, to your point, Candice, like, I'm sure during the commercial break there was an ad for Viagra next, but no, we couldn't talk about female sexuality, but we could have Viagra ads. And that's definitely what I dealt with for a long time. And I think today, hopefully, female sexuality is a little more upfront and center along with male sexuality. But, going back to then, it was hard to even find the clitoris in anatomy books sometimes,
Mhm. So do you think that we've progressed in the sense of understanding female pleasure or prioritizing it or treating it the same way we treat male's pleasure, or do you think we're backsliding a little bit?
Well, I'd ask you, let me ask you that question first. I'll
Sure.
definitely answer it, but like, what do you think? Because, definitely when I was writing She Comes First, and for many years, I felt that we sort of all lived under the shadow of what I call the intercourse discourse, that intercourse was prioritized as the main way to have sex. And in fact, some studies show that if you asked heterosexual couples about the last time they had sex, more than 95% would say that it featured intercourse. And if these couples are being honest, most of them will tell you that they got to intercourse within about 5 minutes. So that does not really prioritize female pleasure very much. So I guess I just answered my own question by saying I think that intercourse still sort of remains the dominant activity. that couples engage in, which is okay. We just have to understand, and there's no doubt about this, that the clitoris is the powerhouse of the female orgasm. And the clitoris does not respond to penetration. In fact, there are very few sensitive nerve endings inside the vagina. The clitoris responds to external rhythmic stimulation, and most intercourse positions fail to provide that because there's what's called the clitoral-vaginal distance, the distance between the clitoris, or the head of the clitoris, the glands of the clitoris, the external part of the clitoris, and the vaginal entrance. And that distance varies from woman to woman, but the greater that distance, the less likely a woman is to experience arousal and orgasm from intercourse. And I think that that is why we still have the orgasm gap, where 98% of heterosexual men will say they orgasmed the last time they had sex, but only about 60% of women, heterosexual women, will say the same thing. So I guess I would say we are still living with this orgasm gap. But again, I wanted to like throw it back to you. Like, what do you think?
So I think that because sex seems to be more mainstream now or tolerated, especially with people doing things like OnlyFans and the conversations around that, that we are linking that to pleasure, and that we think that we've made a lot of progress. But what my experience is, and then the experience of other women that I talk to, um, there's still a big discrepancy between pleasure, between climax, between even being able to ask for what you want. And there was like a survey done of a couple thousand women, and 76% of them reported to regularly fake orgasms. So
Yeah.
to me, that is the most detrimental thing that you could do, because I've never met a man that didn't want to be a rock star in bed or please his partner. So if you're doing that, you're not like, you're giving him false information to work off of. He can't really improve because he thinks he's doing the right thing. So
Yeah.
I think it's the gap is still there, and then you have like this new age content that's coming out that's kind of, in my opinion, a bit of a psyop. It's telling women you don't need to orgasm. That's just like that's just a bonus. Men get to do it. Just enjoy it. And I was like, you wouldn't give this advice to men though. And it's not to say don't enjoy the whole experience, because the orgasm is usually relatively quick. It's like you should enjoy the entire container, but just like dismiss women's climax because it's too difficult, or if it's elusive or whatever, to me that's not fair at all, and I think that that's actually harming relationships.
I 100% agree. On the plus side, I was going to say that more heterosexual couples are comfortable bringing vibrators into bed and using vibration and combining intercourse with clitoral stimulation. And that's good. But I meet more and more young Gen Z women who will say, sort of what you said. They'll say, well, orgasms are for solo sex, orgasms are for masturbation, but when it comes to partnered sex, it's not about the orgasm, it's about some kind of other connection. So I think a lot of women are sort of like abandoning the idea of having having orgasm during partnered intercourse. And like you said, intercourse doesn't have to be the main part of sex. I'm sorry, orgasm. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, I'm getting those terms confused. Orgasm doesn't have to be the only part of sex, but if you are comfortable enough to have an orgasm, it means that you are deeply aroused, you are absorbed in the sex, you're in a flow state with your partner. And that's a beautiful thing for both partners to agree. So I think we're making a real mistake when we sideline the female orgasm. And I think you're right. More women should be self advocating. They should be talking about what turns them on and what gives them pleasure. And I guess why do you think so many women are still faking it?
I think part of it has to do with the agreeable tendency that we as women, largely speaking, tend to fall into. So, not wanting to create any conflict, not wanting to hurt anyone's feelings. Like, you don't want your partner to feel like they're not doing a good job. And then I think a lot of it too is maybe blame. That's what I do a lot. So, it's like, what's wrong with me? This is so easy for everyone else. Like, I'm just broken. So, rather than kind of having to face that or address it, you fake it. Now, I can very proudly say that's something I never do personally, because again, it's just I don't want to create bad feedback. So I will let you know if I'm enjoying something or not. I
Yeah.
do struggle though with asking for what I need. So even if it's something like pace or direction, and I'm like, I don't know where that comes from. And you would have more insight because I know that this isn't an anomaly, but it almost feels like a cat has gotten my tongue. Like I can't get the words out of my mouth, even though I want to, and I know it will help the relationship and all of that. But asking for what I need is really difficult. So, do you have general advice that you give people that you work with that have that same issue?
Yeah, I mean, I have a few things in terms of communicating. One thing I would say is that because heterosexual couples sort of rush to intercourse, that generally, especially since men can get aroused very quickly, like female partners aren't often aroused enough by the time we get to genital stimulation. So just really allowing for what I call the arousal runway or the buildup of arousal will allow a woman's thinking mind to sort of turn off and
Mm,
allow her to become more absorbed in the sex, which means she's actually going to be more receptive to experiencing pleasure. Um, I think a lot of what I call outer course versus intercourse, if intercourse for heterosexual couples is penis and vagina, sex, I think a lot of outer course gets sidelined. And so I think we have to develop sex menus or sexual events that include a lot more outer course, and that's also going to help things feel better. But how do you communicate when you want something that's different than what you're getting, which I think is your question. Now, sometimes people have a hard time, men and women, just articulating what they even want out of bed at all. And so sometimes I'll say, well, position it in the form of a fantasy. Tell your partner when you wake up, like, man, I had the sexiest dream about you last night. Like, I don't know what was going on in my subconscious, but we were doing things that, like, we haven't done before. And then put in, like, like we were having all this oral sex or whatever it is, or we were just having a long, intense makeout session, or we were trying this position, right? Kind of insert in the form of a fantasy what it is that you're missing. But what if you're getting what you want and it still doesn't feel right? You know, I think that's where you have to speak up. And it's kind of the way you would speak up about anything in real time. Oh, ouch, that hurts a little bit, or go a little lighter or a little faster, or that tickles, or let me get here. I mean, we have to be able to communicate about this stuff in kind of a safe frame, and I think that there's so much. I meet so many men who just genuinely want to please their partners, not because they even want to be rock stars in bed or go off to like the locker room and brag. They genuinely want to give their partners pleasure, and the only way to do that is with feedback.
No, I couldn't agree more. And while like some people might think that focusing on sex is like a privilege or it's frivolous or whatever, I would remind them that it is about 1 in 3 marriages end because of some kind of sexual dysfunction. So communication around this is massive. And I think for me, what's helped is creating distance. So if I can't speak up in the moment for whatever reason it is, and I'm sure part of it's like shame based or some kind of confidence issue on my end, but like if it's almost like an after action report. So like you're like,
Yeah,
what did I like? What could have been better? This is something else that I
yeah,
like. And even if it's like in a text or while you're cuddling, that seems a little less vulnerable or a little less scary than in the moment.
totally.
So that's also an option for people.
Yeah, and just establish it right off the top. Start talking. Make talking about sex the way you would talk about anything. And you're so right. I think you said 1 out of 3 marriages fail because of sexual problems. I think that's so true. And there's another study that I love to quote, that couples who have good sex once a week have higher levels of relationship positivity than couples that don't.
Mm.
And the couples that have sex 3, 4, 5 times a week, they don't have higher levels of relationship positivity than the couples who have sex once a week, but the couples who start to have sex less than once a week have lower levels of relationship positivity. So, yeah, I think sex is sort of like a relationship maker or a relationship breaker.
Hmm. So arousal and getting started is a great place to start. So we have spontaneous desire, and then we have
Responsive.
thank you. Yes. So why does it seem that women have spontaneous desire in the beginning? And because this is a thing that a lot of men get really pissed about, especially the
Yeah.
younger ones, because they don't necessarily understand it or have the information. So they're like, well, we had a one night stand and then now we're dating, or it was sex all of the time in the beginning.
Yep.
And what they equate that to, and I totally understand it, but they think that she just lost desire entirely for him. Can you explain what's happening there?
Yeah. So, should we first explain just spontaneous
Sure.
versus responsive quickly?
Yes.
So, there tend to be two desire frameworks that are well documented. One desire framework is a spontaneous desire framework, and that's the desire framework that many men exist within and identify with the most. Visual cue, some kind of sexual cue comes towards them, and they respond and immediately feel that sort of in their body and have a desire to like go,
Mhm.
right? Like desire can almost come from nowhere. It's spontaneous. If my wife, I've been married 25 years, still find my wife really sexy. She's coming out of the shower in a towel and I see her like, that's a sexual cue. And I feel that in my body. And if she was like, come on over here, like I would go, right? Well, unfortunately, my wife doesn't quite experience desire like that, and that happened relatively early in the marriage, after our main courtship period. I could be coming out of the shower in a towel, and she may think, well, like, yeah, he still looks pretty good, but doesn't mean she wants to have sex with me right then and there. So women are in what we would call a responsive desire framework. Desire isn't the first thing they feel, it's like the third or the fourth thing that they feel. There has to be an experience of what we call subjective arousal, the experience of getting turned on, the experience of simmering and percolating. And then a woman's desire will be just as strong as a man's desire. But we live in a culture that sort of glorifies spontaneous desire, right? Everywhere you turn, every advertisement, every TV show, it's couples like, oh, I see you across the room, cut to, we're having passionate sex, you know? And so you can understand why a lot of men feel like, well, everybody experiences desire this way. Like, what's wrong with her? Why doesn't she experience it this way? Or why do I always have to be the one to start things and get rejected? I want to be wanted too.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of women internalize that and will say, yeah, what is wrong with me? I was like so sexual at the beginning of the relationship. Well, there's two things that's happening. One thing is that evolution has designed a very powerful neurochemical cocktail that goes back millennia, which helps us pair bond quite quickly. It's like rocket fuel at the beginning of a relationship that helps us form a tight pair bond so that we can ultimately propagate and move our species forward. So that neurochemical cocktail tends to be like, again, like rocket fuel, and so there will be a lot of spontaneous desire for both partners in the beginning. The other thing, though, is this is the piece of sexual science, is the sexual brain has two systems that operate at once: a sexual excitation system and a sexual inhibition system. So imagine a car, there's an accelerator and a brake. The accelerator is all the things that turn you on, oh, my partner's attractive, I feel good in my body, we had a romantic evening together, we're a little loose and had a drink, I just want to have some great sex, and whatever it is, there are turn ons, but then there are also turn offs, the inhibitors. Oh, I don't feel so good in my body. I'm kind of angry at my partner. There's a million chores that still need to be done. So again, this relationship between excitation, the accelerators, and inhibition the brakes. And if you think about it, in the beginning of a relationship, now imagine a Venn diagram, two circles, right? I'm a circle, you're a circle. We start to fall in love, we start to date, we begin to create that overlap.
Mm.
But what's in the overlap? Just good stuff, like a great date, like looking amazing, knowing we're going to have sex, and like clearing the decks to have sex. It's all exciters and very few inhibitors. But as our relationships grow and that Venn diagram, that overlap becomes bigger, we start to take on more stressors. And so I think for the average couple today, the stressors vastly uh, exceed the exciters. And if you're in a spontaneous desire framework, you can kind of cut through and bushwhack through a lot of those stressors. But I think if you're in a responsive desire framework, you're really sensitive to those stressors. There was one of my favorite studies, studied female arousal in the brain. What does female arousal look like in the brain, and is it different than male arousal? And to do this study, they took a bunch of women. It wasn't like the most women in the world, like maybe like 15 women. And they put them each in fMRI scanners, like those MRI tubes. And while they were in the tubes, either their partners were there, sort of like genitally stimulating them, or they were thinking about sexy things or looking at sexy photos. So what happens in the male brain during sexual arousal? If you're looking at the male brain, a part of the brain that's called the somatosensory cortex, which is the part of the brain that responds to sexual stimuli, that part of the brain starts to light up. It continues to light up. And then when you get to orgasm, there's like this fireworks explosion throughout the entire brain. I mean, orgasm is like the greatest reward in the world, and the whole brain lights up for a few minutes. Same thing happens and sort of doesn't happen in women. As women's sexual brains are getting turned on, another part of the brain is turning off. The part of the brain that's associated with stress, anxiety, environmental factors. So, women, much more than men, need to turn off their thinking brains to turn on their sexual brains. Um, so it's not that like men have spontaneous desire, and that means they're the higher desire partner, and the female partner is the lower desire partner. No, it's just we're in different frameworks, and we have to create a shared framework. And I
I
probably said enough there for the whole episode, and you should
Oh,
continue.
no, my gosh, I love that so much because I think it is, it's such a deserving myth that women don't have desire or that we don't want pleasure or we don't want sex. It is that a lot of things tend to get in the way a lot more, obviously or easily for us than they do for men, typically speaking. So when it comes to shutting off that thinking part or the worrying part or the not being present, because I think that's the key too to experiencing the most pleasure out of intimacy is presence. But a lot of women, myself included, you'll be in it, you'll be close, and then all of a sudden your brain takes you somewhere else, or like the garbage truck is outside. And do you
Yeah.
have practices, or even if it's like a preparation or something to help women kind of get more into their bodies to better set them up for pleasure and arousal?
You know what else you mentioned that's interesting is when we're also looking at sort of clitoral stimulation versus stimulation of the penis. Men experience a moment of ejaculatory inevitability where they're going to have an orgasm no matter what if they've
Hmm.
reached that point of stimulation. But women can lose an orgasm as it's happening.
Yes.
So
What
if
is
there
that?
is change, right, like if there is that like change, that's why like so many women are just like, no, 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 just keep doing whatever you're doing, don't like change it up now, like this is the worst time to change it up, because then the orgasm could get lost. um Candice, it's an interesting question though, like, because women have to turn off their thinking brains, how do we help ourselves to get there? How do we help ourselves to get into such a deep state of arousal that it kind of doesn't matter if there's like a truck outside or a siren. And I think this is where I think that we're missing a huge dimension of sex, which is that if you ask most couples, what did you do the last time you had sex? They're gonna mention a brief menu of physical activities, right? Like, oh, we kissed a little, we undressed, we got naked, boobs, butt, oral, manual, like intercourse, all physical behaviors. But how many couples do you think are going to talk about psychological arousal? Like fantasy, internal, like, yeah, like fantasies. I mean, there have been studies that have shown that women can get themselves to orgasm simply through fantasizing without ever even touching themselves. Like, women can, if they tried hard enough, probably have a hands-free orgasm. Men too can get very aroused, get very erect from watching something, thinking about something, being touched. Not what I won't say being touched, but watching something, thinking about something. So that's the power of psychological arousal to turn ourselves on.
Mm.
But why aren't we sharing more of that in the bedroom with each other? Why aren't we using our minds more? Why aren't we having more brain based sex in addition to sort of the body based sex? Because I think if we were doing both, we were getting the physical arousal and the mental arousal. Well, then, like, arousal is fully capacitated and really there. Most of us are in a state of what we call arousal non-concordance. Our bodies may be aroused, but our minds aren't always aroused, or our minds are aroused, but our bodies aren't necessarily aroused. We have to get both mind and body fully aroused.
Mhm. No, I mean, that's amazing advice. I think it's, for me, all the little things throughout the day that I can do to try to de-stress so that I can be more
Mhm.
present. So knowing what creates cortisol in me, like I hate when there's a mess, or I hate when I have like a huge list in my head, just write it down. That helps a lot.
Mhm.
Making sure that I move during the day. So whether it's going for a walk, like physical movement is very big. So doing the things like kind of the hygiene throughout the day in order to
Mhm.
be like properly set up is one of the things. Um so when it comes to going back to like that orgasm that was about to happen and then doesn't, I tried explaining this the other day to someone, and it's really hard when you try to explain it to a man because like you said, there's a point of no return for you guys.
Yeah,
And I don't know that we have that, or maybe like a few women do, but we it's like exactly how you explain the opposite, where you can be there. And I'm like, I don't want to say I'm close because I don't know. There could be something that happens, or like you move in one way and then all of a sudden we're back to the beginning. So, I guess, do you know why that happens with women
yeah,
genitalia specifically? And then can you restart and then kind of jumpstart that restart so you're not starting over and it's another 30 minutes?
absolutely, absolutely. So, um, I don't know if you've heard of Masters and Johnson,
Yes.
or there was a TV show. So they were the original sex researchers, and they actually studied sex in a laboratory. They had paired individuals, couples having sex with each other, and they did like all of these body readings, heart and brain readings, and they wanted to understand, really what is sexual arousal. So they looked at over like 10,000 paired 10,000 couples, and they made a graph, and I could send you a copy of the graph. But basically, male desire sort of goes up very quickly, reaches orgasm, and comes down very quickly. So it's like zoop, up the mountain, down the mountain, right? For women, they kind of went up the mountain slower than men, but not necessarily that much slower. But rather than going straight to orgasm, women reached a plateau period. So it's sort of like got here and then went like that a little bit, like sort of like in a wave,
Mhm.
and then went to orgasm
Mm.
and came down. So think about it. Men are going straight up, and at the place where they should be intersecting, women are sort of going like that into plateau, and like we're missing each other,
Mm.
right? So what we really need to do is get more in sync. Men need to slow down and really work with their female partners to get into a state that we call entrainment. Entrainment is when you're in mutual flow. It's like when you're dancing with someone and you're not even thinking about the steps, or you're playing music and you're just in it, you know? Sex also induces a state of entrainment. And so that it's called the plateau period. That's a great period, especially for men and their female partners, to say, let's not accelerate. Let's sort of like keep going in this kind of runway here and then get to orgasm together. Um, so I would say that would be my explanation. Blood flows more slowly into the female genitals, and it also leaves more slowly. So to answer the second part of your question, the beautiful thing about female arousal is that women can, in a very natural way, have multiple orgasms because they can get to orgasm, and whereas men, the blood immediately flows out and guys go back to that pre-aroused state, women's the blood comes out of the genitals much more slowly, so women stay sort of like warmed up. And so if you're kind of like aroused but getting interrupted, I don't think it takes much to stay in that place of arousal
Mm,
and get warmed up again and have one orgasm or potentially more orgasms.
mhm. No, that's really helpful. So, I guess adding back in the layer of using your mind, using fantasy, adding another layer to intimacy into the bedroom. Do you have like what would be on your menu for beginners, right? Like, so not
Yeah,
jumping into things that are too scary or too vulnerable. Like if you were to create a menu that introduces novelty and
yeah.
excitement, what would be on your menu?
Well, I think we have to like go slowly. I mean, to me, there are two types of psychological arousal. There's face to
Hmm.
face psychological arousal, and there's side by side. Face to face would be like, hey, like, what's turning you on right now? Or I had this super hot fantasy about you, and let's like start talking to each other. Or like, let's like role play that really fun scene, or let's do something that's really psychologically thrilling. Like here in New York City, we have all these hotels where like people basically go to have sex against the windows so that passersby can like look at them. Um, right, so that's sort of like this face to face arousal, but I think that that's really hard for couples. I mean, how many of us like feel comfortable starting to like role play, or even sharing a fantasy? Like I think we sometimes worry that we're gonna, be judged, or maybe we don't even really know our fantasies or how to articulate them. So I often suggest to couples that they begin sort of side by side. And what do I mean by that? Which is like, take in something that's erotic and psychological that's not of your own creation. Like we're going through a renaissance in erotica, erotic literature, erotic audio, and erotic video, and ethical porn, and porn that's being made according to sort of like, ethical standards where you could feel comfortable watching it and not feel like someone is being, violated or trafficked or objectified. But there's so much sexy material out there. Take that in together
Hmm.
in some ways, and let that psychological arousal sort of wash over both of you. And I've had many couples who I work with where, because I meet with couples, I meet with them every 2 weeks, and I give them homework assignments. I was working with a couple recently, and they weren't, the female partner especially wasn't getting aroused enough during sex, and we started to talk about psychological arousal, and they really both liked the idea. Well, she really liked the idea of watching porn together, and he felt a little like nervous, and that,
Hmm.
that was private,
It's a
and
trap
he
or
was going to be
something.
judged. So I gave them a homework assignment of like picking something that they thought would turn the other one on,
Hmm.
so that was, and interesting way. And then turned out that they were both sort of interested in power play.
Mm.
And so they went from sort of side by side, like watching this sexy power play, to ultimately getting face to face and really engaging in power play. That was psychologically arousing.
You know what's cool about that? So I think a lot of guys would feel like this is a booby trap and she's gonna get mad when I share this or judge what I'm watching. You're never gonna know unless you share it. And what a cool moment that you're exchanging content and you realize your partner's into the same thing. And now you have this whole other thing that you can explore and grow together in. So I mean, like, you're with the person if you love them. I think, and if the plan is to be with them until old age, you have to be vulnerable and willing to look like a fool or
Yeah.
be criticized because on the other end of that is something really cool like that. I love that story.
Yeah. Well, I think, unfortunately, when it comes to sexuality in our culture, most of us, there are three types of sort of home environments that we grew up in when it comes to sex. There is a sex positive environment where sexuality was considered a beautiful and natural feature of life to be enjoyed. There is sex negative. There are sex negative homes where we are shamed, and there's taboos around sex and lots of different rules around sex. And then there's sex avoidant homes where it's not necessarily positive or negative, but it's like never mentioned and never talked about and not really modeled in any healthy way or talked about with parents. And I think in my experience, most of us have grown up in sex avoidant homes. Many of us grow up in sex negative homes, but very few of us grow up in sex positive homes. And if we are growing up in sex avoidant homes, well, then we're avoiding the conversation. So what do we do when suddenly we're in our 20s or whatever we're in, and we want to have these deep, rich conversations about how to have a great sex life? Like, we've never had these conversations.
Hmm.
We've talked about every other subject under the sun, but not sex.
Hmm. Yeah, which is so weird because that's how we all got here, right? It's
Yeah.
vital. It is vital to our existence, and I put it in the needs category. I know technically it's not because you can go your life without it. Although I will say there is evidence that shows if if the clitoris isn't being used, it actually you do lose it, so it'll start to atrophy and go away. So that's kind of a big deal to me as someone that has one, and then with men too, there's a lot of links to reduced prostate cancer, other types of cancer,
Yeah.
longevity. So, I mean, I put it in the need category. I think it's almost as vital as any other nutrient that you're putting in your body.
Yeah, I agree. One of the research studies that I'm sort of doing right now informally is I have noticed with so many Gen Z couples, like either couples that are living together or married together, or married, or millennial couples, that many of them, they're sort of what I call checklist couples when they were picking, they've had sex, they've had hot sex, they've been on apps, but when it came to picking their partner, they made checklists of like what were the most important qualities in a wife and a husband, and many actually left sexual attraction or sexual lust, chemistry off the list. It's going to be a great mom or dad, like gets along so well with my friends and family, like loves to travel and makes me laugh, shares the same religion, makes great money, or they both work, but like they leave sex off. And so many, I end up sitting with so many couples who are trying to create something that wasn't really there in the first place, that sexual chemistry, that sexual attraction, and they really miss it. And I would say, Candice, for those couples, it's a need.
Hmm.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be sitting on my couch paying my fees. They wouldn't be cheating. They wouldn't be talking about, we have a problem, let's open up this relationship, or let's get divorced. So I would agree with you that sex is a pretty vital need, and it's a human right.
Yes, 100% here, here. There's so many places I want to go with that because it goes back to earlier in the conversation, men being frustrated that they always have to initiate, and then a lot of times they're getting turned down, which is not good either, because if you keep turning the guy down, eventually he stops trying, and then you end up in a rut or a grave, and it's gone forever. um, the other problem is it's like the complexities of that dynamic. So a lot of times in my experience, the women are saying no because it feels they feel obligated, or they're
Mhm.
not getting enough enjoyment out of the thing, which requires a lot more of the foreplay and the core play, which we 100% have to get into. It's how do you get over like that awkward stage of you're getting shot down, no one wants to initiate, almost like the roommate phase that people find themselves in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, to your point first, you have to have sex that's worth having,
Mhm.
right? Like, like if you're going to be motivated to have sex and instead of sleeping or watching something fantastic on TV or going out for dinner, like the sex better be good.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think the first thing is like when you do have sex, make sure it's pleasurable, and that comes back to communication. But you know, if you're a guy and you're in a spontaneous desire framework, I think you really have to remember that your female partner, not that she can't or won't experience spontaneous desire. I mean, go to a vacation, go on a vacation to Tahiti where you have nothing to do
Mhm.
and there's no stressors, and you're probably both going to be having a lot more sex. So I think that men who are in a spontaneous desire framework have to understand a responsive desire framework. And that means like you can't just like walk up to your partner from behind when she's like, I don't know, making a meal and say, let's go have sex. Or you can't argue with somebody and then get in bed and expect to have sex. You have it just doesn't, you can't. I hear so many women say, I can't just pivot like that.
Mhm.
I can't go from like being angry and hating you to suddenly like wanting to have sex with you,
Mhm.
or like you're initiating at all the wrong moments. So I think men have to be attuned to what's happening in their partner's environment. They have to understand that they can't expect a mirror image of their own desire, and they have to think about how to create that runway, how to simmer that arousal, how to percolate. And it probably, you said something earlier about like waking up in the morning and just knowing like you want to get to the sex and like having a really good day that like takes those stressors off the table, or includes like connection and romance and positivity. All of that helps to create sexual desire. Now, if you're a female partner and you're in a responsive desire framework, right? You might be thinking, geez, sex, sex, sex. Like, why is it always about sex? Like, what happened to romance, or what happened to intimacy? Or, geez, like all the masturbation or whatever. I mean, like, is he a sex addict? No, he's just in a spontaneous desire framework, and you're not. So, if you're in a responsive desire framework, and desire isn't the first thing you experience, it's like the third or the fourth. I often tell women, well, replace desire with a D for willingness with a W, and have the willingness. Now, I'm not saying it's an obligation, I'm
Mhm.
not talking about anything non consensual, but have the willingness to like show up,
Mhm.
and maybe start to put yourself through the motions, especially if you know that the sex that you're going to have is going to be a really positive, connecting experience. So, for guys, I would say, understand these different frameworks, get more attuned, help to create that arousal runway. I often say, like, there's three ways of getting into sex. There's a hot start, like, oh, I'm just going to throw you on the bed, or you're going to throw me against the wall, and we're going to just start doing it, right? That's fun. Happens sometimes, especially in the beginning of a relationship. Then there's the warm start, which is, oh, like I feel connected. We had a nice meal, or I got everything done, and we're next to each other, and we're sort of feeling each other's warmth and bodies, and it kind of leads into an arousal. That's a warm starter. Then there's like the cold start, which is like, I don't know, you want to make an appointment to have sex in 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
um, so I think rather than thinking about these hot starts, and without getting into the rut of cold starts, think about like how to create warm starts
Mhm.
to sex.
No, I loved the willingness element. That is such a positive reframe to me because uh you can get into a place where you feel like the guy only wants sex, and again it goes back to obligation, and the women are like, "Oh, I don't want to have to do this." I was like, "What, instead of have to, it's like a devotion and you're using it as a connection with them, and take off the pressure and see how that changes." But then there was this exchange that was happening on X yesterday, and I don't know if you've seen this, but it's the big topic of duty sex, or right, and it's like
Hmm.
there's this kind of resurfacing of 1950s marriage advice, and like the woman is unquestionably subservient to the man and she owes him sex, and to the point where they were talking about sex after a baby during the newborn stage, right? Like the woman is still bleeding and recovering, and someone's like, well, you've got three holes and God didn't make a mistake, like you don't ignore the architect. I was like, well, first of all, the other hole is also off limits because, pelvic floor, it's all connected. So, and like that's
Yeah.
already irresponsible and false information. Second of all, if you know anything about, again, female desire, or even like a connection that's beyond just sex, if you're healing, waking up every hour with a baby, sleep deprived, you have a hole the size of a dinner plate inside your womb, right? Like, why are we prioritizing a hand job or a blow job? Like, we should prioritize a different kind of intimacy that is love and connection and like nurturing. And like the focus on sex during that stage to me is immature and often really selfish. And I got just inundated by these people and probably a lot of them were bots, to be fair, but they're like, you're going to be sexless with three cats. I was like, well, first of all, I've got two boys and I have a lot of sex with a great man, so like
Yeah.
all of this is not true, and I've had two babies, unlike the people that are spewing off this advice. What is your opinion on like getting back into sex, men feeling disconnected? Because I do understand that's so important for men. Like that's how you feel connected to your person, but also this is a really delicate time. So like that specific stage, what's your opinion on that scenario? And then also the healthy way to get back into physical sex.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're looking at like the third trimester. Sex often starts to become complicated for couples, through birth. I think through like a good 8 weeks, postpartum. Like we're looking at a long period where we might have to think about sex, differently. I think that there's a big place for masturbation. Like I think, I'm wondering if, you're talking about sort of these trad sex sort of like social
Yeah.
conventions. I wonder like how like masturbation would be viewed, but like you can also take responsibility for your own sexuality and desire
Yep.
for a period of time without imposing it on your partner. I think, there have been studies that have shown that, guess what? You know what moms find sexiest than ever is dads who are involved and connected and good dads. And
Mm-hmm.
it can be really sexy to see, a guy really showing up as a great dad and taking an interest and being involved. So I would say for these men that they should, just because they're in traditional marriages, that doesn't mean like you never change a diaper or you only see your kid for like 10 minutes a day or something like that. And I work with a lot of these. I work with a lot of these relationships that are sort of, traditionally structured as opposed to more egalitarian. And yeah, a lot of men will get indignant that their wives aren't giving them enough sex. And meanwhile, she has two or three kids under the age of three. Um, you know, Again, it kind of comes back to that like warm start, that simmering, that percolation. Like, I think if you're easing back into romance, if you're easing back into having fun again, if you're going out, I meet some couples and they have a 3-year-old and they've never been on a date night
Mhm.
or they've never called a babysitter.
Yeah.
Like, you need to start reconnecting as a couple before the sex. Start having fun again as a couple. I mean, that's where it all started, with your bond together. And I think that that will naturally lead back into sexuality. And I think you want to ease in. I mean, sometimes you might have to introduce like lubrication, or you might have to change the position. I mean, getting back into sex isn't always the easiest thing.
Yeah, and I would emphasize like that reconnection and being playful and not putting all the pressure on the actual like sexual activities. Like that will come, but you have to build the foundation, especially during that stage. To me, it was bonkers. I was like, "Oh, and you don't even have kids. You've never given birth. You have no idea what you're talking about." Um, I would be completely like tarred and feathered if we don't get into foreplay and core play, the importance of those. And if you could, and I know it's going to be impossible to give your protocol because I said it in the intro. It is the most like in depth,
Yeah.
amazing blueprint for people to figure out how to go down on a woman, how to be like just really elevate your time in bed with each other. But yeah, foreplay, core play, and then maybe just like a small, maybe do's and don'ts or like tutorial for like these guys are like, please tell me all of your secrets.
Yeah. Um, Well, I talk about turning foreplay into core play because, again, remember the clitoris is the powerhouse of female sexuality and arousal and orgasm, and the clitoris responds to stimulation, rhythmic stimulation, not necessarily to penetration. So that's why I focus so much on the value of oral sex. Many women will say they are much more likely to have an orgasm from oral sex than from intercourse. So, if we are thinking in terms of outer course, I have this cute phrase I sort of invented called clitoracy, like get clitorate, like don't be clitorate. So many men know more about what's under the hood of a car than the hood of a clitoris. So you can read my book or you can listen to some podcasts, but get yourself clitorate. And if you get yourself clitorate, you will learn that foreplay, all the activities like kissing, touching, manual, oral, that those are actually core play and that they should be extended into complete acts of lovemaking. Um, what else were we
Kind
talking
of
about?
like, so the thing that I found really fascinating and that the men that I have given this book to are just shocked at, for one example, is pressure, right? Like you emphasize taking your time, the importance of anticipation, and like,
Right.
what do you say in your book? It's something like you when you're rocking
Well,
her world, like, you kinda like they use, like, these really intense terms. It's like, "What if you did it as light as a feather?" And they're like, "Wait, what?"
right, right. So a few things. One thing is like oral sex is a very powerful activity, and a woman's body has to be aroused enough to want that. So it's not so many guys are just like go straight for going down.
Mhm,
Like, no, you have to work above the neck. You have to work above the waist, and then you can get below the waist and start getting into oral sex. The other thing to understand is that I often hear from women that having intercourse is a less vulnerable act than receiving oral sex.
mhm,
And I meet many couples where men are very eager to give, oral sex. And women will say, no, I don't like that, or I don't want that. And I think that that usually comes down to some issue related to genital self-esteem, like feeling like, oh, they don't look good enough down there, or smell, or taste, or gosh, he's going to think like this is boring,
mhm.
and how long is it going to go on? So I really, in my book, I really emphasize the importance of reassuring a female partner that, like, you love doing this, she has all the time in the world, like it's a sensory delight. I mean, so many guys, like, that is how they feel, and so they should be really communicating that. to their partners. Um, the other thing is you do not want to treat your tongue like it's like a miniature penis that's just penetrating and going nuts. What you really want to try and do is to get in flow with your partner, and so that means starting off gently, starting off rhythmically. As a woman is getting more aroused, creating more pressure along with that rhythmic stimulation, often allowing a woman to lead. So, if this were a dance, you'd be providing the stimulation, but she would be leaning into it or pulling out of it, leaning into it, adjusting her body. Um, Holding a woman firmly like under the legs so that you're creating some resistance so that she has something to push up against. I often say that or good oral sex isn't always about using your tongue. It's about providing an object of resistance. So very often that could actually be like your gum line or
Mm,
like the top of your teeth. Like you can find that like a woman is actually pressing her clitoris not against your tongue, and it's not what you're that you're licking, or it's that she's actually pressing into something firm
mm,
like your gum line, and you can still use your tongue to provide all of the different kinds of stimulation that you want to provide. We also talked about if you're doing something right and you're getting good feedback, keep doing it. Women can often lose an orgasm, like we said, right at the
mm.
point where they're having it. So keep going until she indicates that you've had enough, and then stop because it can doesn't necessarily feel good to receive a lot of clitoral stimulation right after you've had an orgasm. In my book, I talk about like many different techniques and different ways of using your tongue. But basically, we are talking about friction and pressure, and the more aroused a partner is getting, I think the more that it becomes about the pressure and less about the friction.
Mm.
Anyway, does that start
No,
to?
yeah, and again, people need to get the book because it is so in depth and so detailed, and you do a really, really beautiful job at giving people that blueprint. One of the things that I was really surprised at, and that made a big difference for me, was you talked about like making sure that the woman's legs like weren't too far apart because that actually it works against like the pelvic floor, and I had no idea. I always assumed that you would want to just like make it available, but actually making that difference of kind of having more like parallel legs for me made a huge difference. It's like, oh, I actually like feel more that way.
Absolutely, and then all of your, an orgasm is called myotonia. Is created through myotonia, which is a combination of. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's vasocongestion, which is the blood flow into the pelvic region, and myotonia, which is the muscular tension throughout the body. Right. So if a woman's legs are very far apart, it's very hard to get that requisite muscular tension in the pelvic area.
Yeah, amazing. Again, everyone go check out the book. Before we close out the episode, do you want to tell people where they can follow you, how they can support you, if you're taking on any clients, how they can reach out to you, all that good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm mainly licensed in New York. So if you're in New York State, I have the potential to see you as an individual or as a couple. Sometimes I'm able to do like a coaching session, but I couldn't really do therapy. Uh, my books are available at bookstores, and the main way of reaching me, I'm old school, would be through my website at iankerner.com. And don't do a lot of social media. I'm, Gen X as opposed to, millennial. Um, and I thought while you were talking, I maybe had one other thing about oral sex, but maybe not. It's all in the book.
Yeah, it's again, it's so good, and then, when the next time I'm doing, like, a little book club, so I'm doing the, I guess, sequel, So He Comes Next is on mine. Is
Oh,
there any like, what's your favorite part of that book before I start it?
um, that part, my favorite part, is the shaky bridge theory.
Okay.
And I will allow you to read and learn about the shaky bridge theory. I do remember what I was going to say. Do we have
Yeah,
time
yeah, of
for one?
course, yeah.
Is that, many men think of the clitoris as just sort of like the bump, or the part that they can visibly see above the vaginal entrance. But in fact, the clitoris uses as much material and tissue as the male
No
penis.
way.
It's just that clitorises grow inward and penises grow outward. So if you think about a baby or an infant, that's think about like an infant in the womb, and it's 3 or 4 weeks and you're pregnant, right? That infant has that embryo hasn't been differentiated yet. We don't know if it's going to be male or female. So all of the material is there to create XX or XY, right? So it's not like if we're doing XX and we're doing women that suddenly like that material just gets like digested and goes away. No, the clitoris grows internally. So think about like a wishbone on like a turkey. So the part of the clitoris that you're seeing is the tip of the wishbone, the part that's external. Now imagine sort of these like legs that are inside, right behind there, but not visible, that are made of like very elastic, sort of erectile sensitive tissue. These are called the clitoral legs, and they actually wrap around the entrance of the vagina. And when there's arousal and stimulation, they become sensitized and they tighten. So when women actually say that they're having a vaginal orgasm or a G spot orgasm, or they're talking about how good intercourse feels because it can feel really good. Generally, what they're experiencing, like let's say during penetration, is the vibration against those sort of like clitoral legs that are wrapped around the entrance of the vagina. That's why if you go deep inside the vagina, there's very, very little sensitivity. But if we're talking about like the G spot, or sensitive parts of the vagina, it's really at the vaginal entrance where the clitoral legs are wrapping around the vagina and are very sensitive to vibration, either vibration through a vibrator or through the friction of fingers or through the friction of a penis. So that's another tip that I would have is don't forget the internal clitoris. It doesn't mean you can't have a finger or two inside the vagina or a sex toy inside the vagina. It's not about going deep. It's not about
Yes.
deep thrusting. It's about staying in like imagine like the entrance to the vagina is a doorway. Well, I want to take a couple of steps through the door, look up at the ceiling, look around me. Like that's the area we're working with.
That was also one of the biggest things that I learned from the book that I had no idea because I was always under the impression that, the G spot was like deeper inside and you had to go in like 4 inches or whatever that was. And then it was part of one of the techniques that you have in the book. And you're like, just put a thumb at the entrance, like that pressure just
Yeah,
at the entrance. And the amount of sensation that like I experienced from that was like way superior to anything else. I'm like, holy cow, it's been on the outside this whole time and I had no idea. And no wonder men are so lost because I have one. I've had one for 36 years and I'm
right.
still learning how and where everything is. It's amazing.
Well, thank you very
No,
much.
thank
I mean,
you. I owe you a big thank you.
to espouse cliteracy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, again, it's one of those things you have to keep reading because there's just so much information, but so useful and I hope everyone buys a copy and this is a game changer for everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you
Candice.
again. I would love to do this again sometime whenever you have time, or if I actually make it to New York anytime, I will let you know. But this was
Yeah, if I
wonderful.
make it to wherever you are, like, I tend to sort of be here, but it would be great to meet in
Yeah,
person.
absolutely. Well, thank you very much. And I will link all your resources below. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That was so good. The only thing that would have been better is if I was in person. But seriously,
Well,
that book is incredible. Game changer.
thank you. It's funny. It's my first book and still my favorite. My two favorites are She Comes First and then the last book I wrote called So Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex. I'm not as crazy about He Comes Next, which has been retitled Passionista. It's not a bad book. There's a lot of some good stuff in there, like the Shaky Bridge Theory, but the two books that I'm most proud of are She Comes First and So Tell Me About the Last Time You Had
Okay.
Sex.
I'll definitely check that one out. What's that one about, the last time you had sex?
It's really so many couples come in to my office with like sex problems, like she can't have an orgasm, or he's losing his erection, or they're not mutually experiencing desire. And very often, once I've learned about the problem, I will ask an individual or a couple to tell me about the last time they had sex. And I really want to hear from beginning to end every activity and what they did, and that to me creates what I call the sex script. And so then I'm looking at what a couple's sex script is, because most couples tend, when sex is working, they tend to have a script or a script or two, or ways of like getting there. And so we'll sort of work with like, well, what is your sex script? Where is your sex script not working, which is why you're creating this problem? And then how do we rewrite that sex script,
Oh,
basically?
fun. Yeah, I'll read that. I'll let you know after I finish it, and then maybe we could do like an episode on that if you're interested.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Sweet. Well, thank you very much. I hope you're not getting bombarded by this storm and you're good where you're at.
No, today's great. Yesterday was crazy. I went out to dinner and it was totally, totally nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And that's it for this week's episode. But before you leave, if you could hit that 5-star review button, that helps me out a ton. That I'm trying to currently get some more sponsors and affiliates, and the number of ratings is something that they look at. Also, we have some sponsors and affiliates below. These are all products that I enjoy and I like. So check those out. And if you want to support the podcast, you can go to chattingwithcandice.com, sign up for our Patreon, or click that little link that says buy me a coffee. Our Patreon, you get early access to episodes, so that's fun and exciting. And then you get little hints at who our next guest is going to be and opportunities to ask some questions. I think that's all I've got for today. I will see you next time. Bye, everybody.